Welcome back to the Daily Lift. And today I want to share with you one of the most powerful scenes that we have in all of the gospel. And surprisingly, it's one of the most overlooked scenes that we have in the gospel as well. And it's found in John 18. But before we get to John chapter 18 and this amazing account in the Garden of Gethsemane, I want to travel over to Philippians chapter 2. And what Paul is saying here to the church in Philippi in Philippians chapter 2, verse 9, 10, and 11, about how Jesus, he has all authority and his name is above all names. And so he says here to the church of Philippi, therefore God also has highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow, of those in heaven and of those on earth and of those under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And so here we are reminded by Paul that Jesus has all authority and that every knee shall bow. Everybody in heaven, under heaven, on earth, we have here this scene where Jesus is supreme. Now let's jump over to John chapter 18, and I want to share this wonderful passage with you. In John 18, we have Jesus just spending a lot of quality time with his apostles, and he's preparing them for his departure. And he knows what is about to happen. They're in the garden, and he is about to meet the mob. So let's jump in. John 18, verse 1. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. And Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, he came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. And Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, he went forward and said to them, whom are you seeking? And they answered to him, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus said to them, I am he. And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood there with them. And now when he said to them, I am he. Now listen to this part, because this is the part that is so powerful and it is often overlooked. And when Jesus said, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. And then he asked them again, whom are you seeking? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And if we keep reading, we know the story. Peter chops off the ear of Malchus, the high priest's servant. Jesus restores his ear. They had captured Jesus, and all the apostles are scattered. And we see here this scene, this glimpse of what it's going to be like on the day of judgment. You see, on the day of judgment, we'll have the sheep and the goats. And those who are obedient to God, they will be bowing their knees to him in glory, in jubilation. But those who are disobedient, they'll also be bowing, but out of terror and fear of what's to come. And now, when we look at this passage in Philippians chapter 2, we see that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is the Christ. What we want to make sure is that we're on the right side of that every. We want to make sure that we are doing it out of our own will. Unlike these individuals here in the garden who dropped to the ground at the very acknowledgement that Jesus is the one. I am who I am is who he says. Also what God the Father says. And so I want to encourage you today to get into the word so you can find gems like this and that you can associate and connect these dots. Because on that day of judgment, every knee is going to bow and every tongue is going to confess. Let's make sure that we are confessing and that we're bowing to the Christ, to the Almighty, before that day of judgment or before we leave this place, whichever comes first. And as always, go lift somebody up.